It started with something small. Knit to message. Knit to late night. Knit even a lie. Fiddle. Just a detail that didn't belong. It was a Tuesday evening, sometime after 8. Nothing special. Dinner was already in the table. The house quiet in that familiar way it gets when everything feels settled. My best friend was there again. Lately, he had been coming over more often. At first, it felt natural. We'd known each other for years. He'd been there long before my marriage. Long before everything I thought I understood about my life. And my wife, she seemed comfortable around him. Too comfortable, maybe. Dalvik. But I didn't question it. Why would I? Trust isn't something you think about when it's intact. It's something you only notice once it starts to crack. That night I saw something I couldn't quite explain. A look, a pause, a silence that lasted just a second too long. I told myself it was nothing. But that was the moment everything changed. Before all of that, things were simple. Knit perfect. But steady in a way that makes you stop questioning things. We had been married for a little over 6 years. Long enough to settle into routines that didn't need explaining. Mornings were predictable. Coffee brewing before either of us spoke. A quiet exchange of looks instead of long conversations. Evenings were the same. Dinner at the table. Sometimes a show playing in the background. Neither of us was really watching. It wasn't exciting. But it felt real. And at that point in my life, real was enough. I worked long hours, but I made sure I was present when I was home. She had her own rhythm too. Her own space, her own time. We didn't question each other much. Not because we didn't care, but because we trusted what we had built. And then there was him. My best friend. We had known each other since our early 20s. The kind of friendship that doesn't need constant contact to stay intact. He was there for everything, the good decisions, though the bad ones, even the wins I never talked about. When I introduced him to my wife years ago, it felt natural, like 2 parts of my life finally meeting. There was no hesitation, no awkwardness, a look. If anything, I remember thinking how easy it all felt. Looking back now, I think that's what made it dangerous. Because when everything feels that natural, you stop paying attention. And sometimes that's exactly when things begin to shift. At first, nothing really stood out. That's the strange part about it. There wasn't a moment where everything suddenly felt wrong. It was quieter than that. He just started coming over more often. Knit every day. Knit in a way that would make you question it immediately. Just enough to feel like a new pattern was forming. At first I didn't think much of it. We'd always been close. And life has a way of pulling people apart over time. So when he started showing up again, it almost felt like we were getting something back. But then I noticed something else. He didn't always wait for me to be home. A few times, I walked in and found them already sitting together. Conversation flowing easily, too easily. She would look up, smile, and say something casual like, "Oh, he just stepped by." And he would nod, like it didn't need explaining. I told myself it was normal. But there was something in the way she said it, something rehearsed, but little. Then there were the small details. The way she started fixing her hair before answering the door. The way her tone changed slightly when she spoke to him. Not dramatic, just softer. I noticed how they shared quick glances. The kind that disappear the moment someone else is in the room. At one point, I caught him laughing at something she said. But when I asked what was so funny, he just shook his head and said, "You had to be there." That stayed with me longer than it should have, because I realized, bandit. There were moments happening between them that I wasn't part of. And that wasn't something I was used to. Still, I didn't confront it. Not yet. Because nothing I had seen was enough to prove anything. But it was enough to plant a question. And once a question like that exists, it doesn't go away. That question stayed with me longer than I expected. At first, I tried to ignore it. I told myself I was overthinking. After all, there was no real evidence, no messages, no obvious lies. Just a feeling. And feelings aren't something you can't confront someone with. But once it's there, it changes how you see everything. I started noticing things I hadn't paid attention to before. The way she checked her phone more often when he was around, not constantly, just enough to feel intentional. The way conversations would stop for a split second when I entered the room, not long enough to be obvious, but long enough to feel placed. There was one night that stood out. We were all sitting in the living room, nothing unusual, just background noise from the TV, half-finished drinks on the table. At some point, I get up to grab something from the kitchen. It took less than a minute. But when I came back, they weren't talking. They were just sitting there, too still. Like I had walked in the end of something I wasn't meant to hear. I remember looking at both of them. She smiled, first, a little too quickly. He followed. And just like that, everything went back to normal. Or at least it looked that way. That's when I stopped dismissing it. Because it wasn't just one moment anymore. It was a pattern. Subtle, carefully hidden, but consistent. I didn't feel angry. Not yet. What I felt was something else. Distance. Like I was slowly being moved out of something. I didn't realize I was already losing. And the strangest part was, I don't think they realized I was starting to see it. Or maybe they did. And they just didn't think I would do anything about it. That thought stayed with me. Because the more I watched, the more I understood one thing. Whatever was happening, it wasn't new. I didn't confront them right away. Not because I was afraid, but because I didn't have anything concrete. Just patterns, and silence. And I knew how that would sound. So I waited. I watched a little longer, listened more carefully. Until one night, it felt like I couldn't ignore it anymore. It was late. He had just left. The house was quiet again. But something about the way the door closed behind him, it didn't feel like the end of a visit. It felt like something unfinished. She was in the kitchen, rinsing a glass. I stood there for a moment, just watching her. Then I said calmly, "Do you think he's been coming over a little too often?" She didn't turn around immediately. Just a slight pause. Then she shrugged. "He's your friend." Her tone was casual, too casual. "I know," I said. "But sometimes it feels like I'm the one interrupting." That made her turn. A small smile, almost amused. "Clave, you're overthinking?" There it was. Simple, clean, dismissive. I didn't react. "Low-bout?" I just held her gaze and said, "Am I?" She set the glass down. "You've been stressed lately," she continued. "Work, everything, it's probably just getting to you." It sounded reasonable, measured, almost convincing, up close caught. But something about it felt practiced. like she had already prepared that answer. I leaned slightly against the counter. "I'm not accusing you of anything," I said. I'm just asking." She exhaled, shaking her head. "There's nothing to ask," she replied. "You trust me, don't you?" That question landed differently than she intended. Because it wasn't reassurance. It was pressure. A way to make the conversation about me instead of her. I knitted slowly, "Distingo." "Yeah," I said. "And," I meant. At least part of me still did. She stepped closer then, her voice softer. "You're reading into things that aren't there." I didn't. Argo. Didn't raise my voice. Because in that moment, I realized something important. She wasn't trying to convince me. She was trying to control how far I was willing to look. On the more calm she stayed, the more certain I became that I was already too close to the truth. After that conversation, I stopped asking questions. Not because I was convinced, but because I realized something else. If I kept asking, they would just get better at hiding it. So instead, I paid attention. Quietly, I started noticing the timing of things. When he came over, when she seemed more alert, more present, when her mood shifted in ways that didn't quite match the moment. It wasn't obvious. Cool. It never is. But patterns don't need to be loud to exist. They just need to repeat. One evening, I told her I'd be working late. I didn't explain, just said I wouldn't be home until after 9. She nutted, didn't ask any questions. That alone stayed with me. Because normally she would. Instead, she just said, "Okay, I'll probably just relax tonight." Her tone was neutral. Too neutral. I left the house, but I didn't go far. I parked a few blocks away, and I waited. Knit lung. About 20 minutes later, I saw his car pull up. He didn't hesitate, met Zeit the oft for. Didn't text, didn't call. He just walked straight to the door. Like he already knew he was expected. That told me more than anything else. I didn't rush back inside. I didn't confront them. Because at that point, I wasn't trying to catch them. I was trying to understand how long this had been happening. And more, importantly, how far it had already gone. I didn't go back inside that night. I stayed in the car a little longer. Just long enough to understand what I was looking at. Then I drove away. Not because I was unsure, but because I didn't need to see more. Some things become clear before they confirmed. Over the next few days, I paid even closer attention. The timing became predictable, the patterns more defined. And eventually, I saw enough. One afternoon, I came home earlier than expected. No warning, no message. Just walked in like I always did. The house was quiet, but not empty. I could hear voices from the living room. Low, close. I stepped forward slowly, not trying to be silent, but not announcing myself either. And then I saw them. Not anything dramatic or cluned. Not what most people would expect. No panic, no scrambling. Just the two of them sitting too close. Closer than friends should be. Her hand resting near his. Not quite touching, but not accidental either. On the way they looked at each other, that was enough. I didn't say anything. I didn't react. Because in that moment, I already understood the first part of the truth. This wasn't new. And it wasn't a mistake. That should have been enough. For most people, it would have been, but something about it didn't sit right with me. Not because I doubted what I saw, but because it felt too comfortable, too natural. Like I had just walked into something that had been going on for far longer than I understood. So I kept watching. Not them this time. The past. I started going back through things I hadn't questioned before. Old photos, messages, moments that once felt normal. And that's when I found it. A photo. Taken years ago. Before we get married. Before everything I thought we had built together. It was from a small gathering I barely remembered. A few friends, and nothing special. But in that photo, they were standing closer than they should have been. Closer than I ever noticed at the time. On the way he was looking at her. It wasn't new. That expression wasn't something that just appeared recently. It had been there all along. I kept digging. Knit obsessively, just carefully. And piece by piece, something started to come together. They didn't just reconnect recently. They never really stopped. They were gaps. Ling periods where nothing seemed obvious. But the pattern was still there. Hidden. Patient. Waiting for the right moment to become something more. And then another thought hit me. When I didn't want to follow. But I couldn't ignore it anymore. I started counting timelines. Dates. Moments. Milestones. And when detail stood out more than anything else. The year our son was born. Was also the year he suddenly became distant for a while. At the time I thought it was just life pulling him away. Now, it felt like something else entirely. I didn't react. I didn't confront them. Because by then, this wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about how deep it actually went. And I wasn't sure I was ready to hear the answer out loud. I didn't confront them after that. Not immediately. Because once that thought settled in, everything else became quiet. Not peaceful. Just still. I remember sitting alone in the living room that night. The house felt exactly the same as it always had. Nothing broken. Nothing out of place. And yet, nothing felt like mine anymore. I looked around at everything we had built together. The furniture, the photos, the small details that used to mean something. And for the first time I realized I didn't know which parts of it were real, or if any of it ever truly was. What stayed with me the most wasn't anger. It was something quieter. The realization that I had been present in my own life, but not fully aware of it. That moments I thought belonged to us might have never been just ours. I thought about my son, about the timeline, about all the things I had never questioned. And that was the part that stayed in my chest the longest. Not the betrayal itself, but how easily I had accepted everything as truth, without ever looking deeper. I didn't break down in the way people expect. No shouting, no throwing things. Just silence, loathful. The kind that doesn't come from calm, but from understanding something you can't undo. And in that silence, when thought kept repeating, I should have seen it sooner. I didn't confront them in anger. By the time I finally said something, there wasn't much left to prove. It happened a few days later, nothing dramatic, or 5-0. Just the three of us in the same room again. The same space where everything had slowly unfolded. I looked at him first, then at her, And I said calmly, how long? No accusations. No raised voice. Just a question.
Do the grief?
For a moment, neither of them answered. That silence told me more than anything else could have. She looked at him. He looked away. And that was enough. Eventually, she spoke. It's not what you think, she said. I almost smiled. Not because it was funny, but because I had already heard that version before. I'm not asking what it is, I replied. I'm asking how long. That's when everything shifted. The denial didn't last. Because there was no point anymore. It hadn't just been recent. It hadn't just been a mistake. It was something that had existed in pieces for years, long before I ever noticed it. The rest of the conversation didn't matter. Nit the explanations.
Misty stickled.
Nit the reasons. Because none of it changed what I already understood. No, I didn't argue. I didn't try to fix anything. Some things aren't meant to be repaired. They are meant to be recognized for what they really are. I left that night. Nit in a rush. Nit out of anger. Just done. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't trying to figure anything out anymore. I already had my answer. Looking back, I don't think the betrayal started the way I once imagined. It wasn't one decision, nit one moment where everything changed. It was quieter than that. Something that grew over time, in the spaces where I wasn't paying attention. And that's the part people don't talk about. We think betrayal is loud, obvious, impossible to miss. But most of the time, it's built in things that feel harmless at first. Comfort, familiarity, moments that don't seem important enough to question, until they are. I used to think trust meant not having to look too closely. Now I understand it differently. Trust isn't blindness. And it isn't silence. It's awareness. The willingness to notice when something feels EF, even when you don't have proof yet. Because the truth rarely appears all at once. It shows up in fragments, in pauses, in glances, in things that don't quite fit but are easy to ignore. And if you ignore them long enough, they don't go away. They just become something bigger. I don't regret trusting them. But I do understand now that sometimes the most dangerous thing isn't betrayal itself. It's how easily we convince ourselves there's nothing to see,